The Exeltar Empire had conquered hundreds of planets. Their technology was far more advanced than most species they encountered. They were warriors, undefeated, unstoppable. Every new world they discovered was the same: weak, primitive, and easy to control. This time, their scouts had found a blue planet in a small solar system. The local species called it Earth. Commander Velor stood inside the command chamber of his scout ship, staring at the holographic display of Earth. His red eyes narrowed as he studied the planet below. From space, it looked peaceful. Vast blue oceans, green forests, and bright cities glowing in the night. "It doesn't seem like a threat," one of his officers said. Velor crossed his arms. "We've learned not to judge a planet by its appearance. Begin the scan. I want to know everything about this species." The ship's powerful scanners activated, sending invisible waves down to the surface. The Exeltar expected to find a small, weak military presence, maybe a few outdated war machines. They assumed Earth's defenses would be like every other primitive world they had conquered. But the data that came back shocked them. Vaylor's eyes widened as the numbers filled the screen. Millions of soldiers, thousands of warships, an army so large that it covered the entire planet. "Impossible," an officer whispered. Velor clenched his jaw. "Run the scan again." The machine hummed, analyzing Earth's surface once more. The results were the same. Humanity had an army larger than any they had ever seen. The Exeltar had fought against planets with armies of a few million before, but this was something else. Earth had military bases on every continent, thousands of ships in orbit, and advanced weapons unlike anything the scouts had seen. "This can't be real," another officer said, shaking his head. "No species develops this much military power unless they've been at war." Velor finished his sentence, his voice low and serious. Silence filled the chamber. The Exeltar had always believed that their empire was the most battle-hardened species in the galaxy. But humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. Velor turned to his officers. "Show me their war history." A new screen appeared, filled with historical records pulled from human databases. It was worse than he imagined. Wars, so many wars. Humans had fought each other across centuries. They had destroyed entire cities, wiped out millions of their own people, and still, they kept advancing. Every war made them stronger, smarter, deadlier. One officer whispered, "They didn't just survive their wars. They thrived in them." Velor stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The Exeltar Empire had never seen anything like this before. A species that didn't fear war, but embraced it. And now, they were about to face them. For the first time in his life, Commander Velor felt something strange. Doubt. Was Earth truly just another planet to conquer? Or had they just made a terrible mistake? Commander Velor stood frozen, his red eyes locked onto the data streaming across the holographic screen. His officers murmured in disbelief, their rigid discipline slipping under the weight of the impossible truth. Humanity was not just strong. It was an anomaly. Their species should not exist like this. Every empire the Exeltar had conquered followed a simple pattern. Once a civilization reached a certain technological level, they either united under a single banner or collapsed under their own weight. Wars were destructive, unsustainable. Species that fought too many eventually wiped themselves out. But humans had turned war into an art form. Velor clenched his fists behind his back, maintaining his composure as the reports continued to pour in. His officers looked at him, waiting for orders, but he remained silent. He needed time to process what he was seeing. "Show me their largest battles," he finally said. The screen flickered, revealing grainy footage of Earth's past conflicts. First, a battle from centuries ago. Primitive soldiers charging at each other with swords and shields, their formations shifting in the chaos. Thousands died in mere hours. Then came the gunpowder wars, cannons roaring, trenches filled with mud and blood, explosions tearing through ranks of soldiers. The footage jumped forward again. The World Wars. Valor's breath caught in his throat as he saw the sheer scale of the devastation. Cities turned to rubble. Weapons that burned entire landscapes. Millions of bodies left behind in a single war. Then came something even worse. A blinding flash. A mushroom cloud rising into the sky. Nuclear weapons. His officers gasped. One of them took a step back, as if he could physically escape what he was seeing. They used this on their own world. Someone whispered. More than once, another answered grimly. Valor's mind raced. No empire in the galaxy would dare to use such weapons on their own soil. It was madness. Suicide. Yet humans had not only survived, they had flourished. The footage continued, showing modern battles fought with drones, mechanized armor, orbital strikes. Their technology may have been behind the XLTAR in some areas, but their tactics were unparalleled. They adapted too quickly. They learned too fast. Valor turned away from the screen, his thoughts spiraling. The XLTAR had planned to take Earth with a simple planetary siege. Shock and awe tactics, overwhelming firepower, standard procedure. But now he saw the fatal flaw in their plan. Humanity would not break under fear. They would fight. And unlike every other species the XLTAR had encountered, they had more experience in war than the conquerors themselves. "Commander," one of his officers spoke hesitantly, breaking the silence. "What are your orders?" Valor took a deep breath, steadying himself. He could not afford to show weakness. "Prepare a deeper infiltration mission. I want to understand how they think, how they strategize. If we are to take this planet, we must know more than just their numbers." He turned back to the screen, staring at the image of Earth as if it were a slumbering beast, waiting to be awakened. Something inside him whispered that this mission was different from any before. And for the first time in his career, he wasn't sure if they would win. The XLTAR scout ship drifted silently in high orbit above Earth, its cloaking systems engaged. Inside the command chamber, Commander Valor stood at the center, watching as his officers carried out his orders. The tension in the room was heavy, pressing down on everyone like an invisible force. No one spoke unless absolutely necessary. The realization that humanity was unlike any species they had ever encountered had changed everything. A full-scale invasion, which had once seemed like a routine conquest, now carried an air of uncertainty, even fear. Valor would not allow that fear to spread. He needed more information before making his next move. "Deploy the infiltration team," he ordered. A section of the ship's hull shifted, revealing a small fleet of reconnaissance pods. The sleek, black crafts detached, entering Earth's atmosphere unnoticed. Each pod carried a team of highly trained XLTAR operatives, warriors bred for stealth, combat, and data collection. Their mission was simple: observe, learn, and report back. As Valor watched the pods descend, he thought of everything they had already uncovered. Humanity's strength was not just in their numbers or their weapons. It was something deeper. A mindset. A will to fight. He had read their history, seen their endless wars, and now he needed to witness their world firsthand. The first infiltration pod landed in a dense urban environment, hidden between towering buildings. Inside, Specialist Karath adjusted his visor, his breathing steady. The streets below were alive. Humans walked in every direction, unaware of the alien presence among them. Karath and his team blended into the shadows, their camouflage suits shifting to match their surroundings. They moved swiftly through the city, observing everything. The humans were strange. Despite their brutal history of war, their cities were filled with light, music, and laughter. They engaged in simple rituals, gathering in places filled with food, speaking in groups, trading objects, displaying symbols of status. And yet, beneath the surface, there was something else, a readiness. Karath noticed the subtle signs: the security forces patrolling the streets, the news reports discussing global conflicts, the humans who trained in combat sports, even those who casually carried weapons. There was no complacency here, only a species that had accepted violence as part of existence. They were warriors, even in peace. In another part of the planet, a second infiltration team landed near a massive military base. The XL-TAR had expected Earth's forces to be centralized, their leadership easy to locate. They were wrong. Earth's military was everywhere, not just in one city, not just in one country. Every nation had its own armies, its own weapons, its own soldiers. Unlike other species that unified under a single military force, humans competed with each other in war. It was madness, and yet it made them stronger. The operatives scanned the base, their visors feeding real-time data back to the command ship. The more they learned, the more their unease grew. One soldier, a towering human with a hardened expression, was instructing a group of younger recruits. His voice was calm, steady, filled with authority. The XL-TAR operatives listened carefully. The moment you hesitate, you're dead. If you think the enemy will show you mercy, you're already defeated. The recruits nodded, their eyes filled with understanding. They weren't just being trained. They were being conditioned, forged. Karath's grip tightened on his weapon. The XL-TAR Empire prided itself on its warriors, but these humans, they were something else entirely. They didn't just train for war. They lived it. Back on the command ship, Valor stood in silence as the reports came in. The infiltration teams had gathered valuable intel, but the conclusion was becoming painfully clear. Humanity was not an enemy to be underestimated. For the first time, he questioned whether an invasion was truly possible. "We have learned much," he finally said, turning to his officers, "but we still do not know the most important thing." An officer looked at him, confused. "Commander." Valor narrowed his eyes. "Their breaking point. Every species has one. We must find humanity's weakness before we make the mistake of challenging them." The chamber fell into silence. Because deep down, they all feared the same thing. What if humans didn't have one? The infiltration teams had returned. Their reports filled the command deck of the XL-TAR scout ship, each one more unsettling than the last. Commander Valor stood in the center, reviewing the data, his mind racing through every possible scenario. Humanity was nothing like the species they had conquered before. The more they observed, the more they realized how impossible this invasion was becoming. But there had to be a way. Every species had a weakness. Valor turned his gaze toward the lead intelligence officer, Karath, who had just returned from Earth's surface. "Tell me," Valor said, his voice calm but firm. "What have you discovered?" Karath hesitated. The hesitation alone was a bad sign. "They are unpredictable, Commander," he finally said. "They are not bound by logic. Their emotions fuel them in ways we do not fully understand. They should be divided, yet in war, they unite. They should crumble under fear, yet they become stronger." Valor narrowed his eyes. "What about their leadership? Their command structure?" Karath shook his head. "There is no single leader, no empire, no central authority to strike at. They have governments, but they do not rule in the way we do. Even their armies are separate, yet all are ready to fight if their species is threatened." This was troubling. The XL-TAR had always relied on swift, decisive strikes to cripple a species' command structure. But how do you decapitate an enemy that had no head? Valor studied the reports again. There had to be something. Some flaw in their psychology, their biology, their way of thinking. "Tell me about their battle strategies," he said. Karath exhaled slowly. "They do not fight like we do. They have no singular doctrine. They adapt. We observe their soldiers in training. They analyze their opponents, find weaknesses, and exploit them. Even their historical battles show this. If they lose once, they come back stronger. They learn from failure. They never fight the same way twice." Valor's grip tightened behind his back. This was dangerous. a species that could change faster than their enemies could react. That was not just a threat. That was a nightmare. Are they reckless? Another officer asked. Perhaps they rely too much on brute force. Karath shook his head. They use deception. They fight dirty. They will sacrifice their own soldiers if it means winning the war. They do not care about honor, only survival. And that makes them more dangerous than any species we have faced. Valor turned back to the holographic screen, displaying Earth's surface. He had expected to find a primitive, disorganized species that would crumble under superior firepower. Instead, he had found something far worse. A species that had perfected the art of war. There was only one option left. If we cannot break them through force, Valor said slowly, we must break them from within. Karath looked at him carefully. What are you suggesting, Commander? Valor's gaze darkened. We infiltrate deeper. We exploit their divisions. We push them towards self-destruction. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Even among the Exceltar, this was considered ruthless. Conquering a planet through military strength was one thing. Manipulating a species into tearing itself apart was another. But there was no other choice. If war makes them stronger, Valor said, then we will make them fight among themselves. We will find the cracks in their alliances, the weaknesses in their unity. If they will not kneel before us as an enemy, they will fall as their own worst enemy. For the first time since the mission began, Valor saw something he had not expected from his officers. Doubt. Commander, Karath said cautiously, what if they see through it? What if, instead of destroying themselves, they come together even stronger? Valor met his gaze with an unwavering stare. Then we will have done the impossible, he said. We will have given them a reason to hate us, and that will be our final mistake. No one spoke. The weight of those words hung heavy in the chamber. Because deep down, they all felt the same, gnawing fear. If humans ever decided to take revenge, the galaxy itself would burn. The silence aboard the Exceltar command ship was suffocating. The officers had dispersed, each retreating to their respective stations, but the tension lingered like a shadow. Commander Valor sat in his private chamber, the dim holographic glow illuminating his hardened features. His mind raced through the implications of their next move. Infiltration was not their usual method. The Exceltar were conquerors, warriors, dominators of countless species. They had never encountered an enemy that required such deception, until now. And that unsettled him. A chime echoed through the chamber. Karath was requesting entry. Valor straightened. Enter. The intelligence officer stepped in, his usual confidence dampened by something far more troubling. Uncertainty. Commander, Karath began, his voice even but carrying a weight Valor did not like. There is something else you need to see. Valor gestured toward the console. Karath inserted a data module, and a hologram flickered to life. Streams of intercepted human communications scrolled rapidly. Military broadcasts, civilian chatter, classified documents pried from their deepest vaults. The Exceltar had spent decades refining their espionage capabilities. No species had ever hidden anything from them. But this was different. Valor's eyes narrowed. What am I looking at? Karath hesitated before answering. Human history. Valor scoffed. We have already studied their wars. Karath shook his head. Not like this. The hologram shifted, revealing images, photographs, videos, battle records spanning millennia. The scale was overwhelming. Wars fought over resources. Wars fought over ideology. Wars fought over land, over pride, over vengeance. Some conflicts lasted decades. Others wiped entire civilizations off the map. And yet through every war, every disaster, humans emerged stronger. They don't just fight, Karath said, his voice quiet but filled with something akin to reverence. They evolve. The images changed again, now displaying technological leaps made during war. Humans did not just destroy. They'd rebuild. They innovated. They adapted. The XLTAR had always believed war was the ultimate tool of domination. But for humans, war was something else entirely. It was an opportunity. Viller's fingers curled into a fist. Are you suggesting we have underestimated them? Karath did not flinch. I am suggesting, he said carefully, that war may not be the weakness we thought it was. It may be the very thing that makes them unstoppable. A cold dread settled over Viller's chest. He had considered humans dangerous, but this was beyond anything he had prepared for. The XLTAR had conquered hundreds of worlds, each species falling in line under their rule. Their dominance had been absolute. But now, for the first time, an unsettling thought crept into Viller's mind. What if humanity could not be conquered? He leaned back, staring at the holographic display. Then what do you propose, Karath? If war only makes them stronger, if deception is a gamble, what remains? Karath took a slow breath. We rethink everything we know about conquest. Viller's jaw tightened. Explain. Karath stepped forward. We must understand what truly drives them. It is not fear. It is not power. It is not even survival. He gestured to the hologram, where images of human warriors flashed, some in ancient armor, some in modern military gear, some standing before destroyed cities, their eyes burning with purpose. It is something deeper, Karath continued. A belief, a defiance that no other species possesses. Valor exhaled sharply, his mind racing. If Karath was right, if humans thrived in the face of war, then any direct confrontation would only forge them into something even deadlier. But if they could be manipulated? Viller's eyes flickered with new determination. We must go deeper, study them from within, learn what truly makes them fight. Karath hesitated before responding. And what if we discover something worse? Viller's gaze darkened. Then we will know the truth. And if that truth is something we cannot control. He turned toward the massive viewport, staring at the blue and green planet below them. Then the galaxy itself is in far greater danger than we ever imagined. The XLTAR fleet hung in the void, an armada of silent predators circling their unsuspecting prey. But now something was different. Something had shifted. Commander Valor could feel it, a change in the very fabric of their understanding. The humans were not prey. They were something else entirely. Karath had spent the last cycle analyzing everything: war records, intercepted transmissions, cultural archives, even human myths. And the conclusion was the same, over and over again. Humanity was an anomaly. No species should have survived the wars they waged on themselves. No species should have endured nuclear devastation, biological plagues, planetary collapses, self-inflicted atrocities that should have extinguished them centuries ago. And yet not only had they survived, but they had thrived. It was beyond unnatural. It was terrifying. Valor paced in his command chamber, his thoughts racing. If war made humans stronger, if suffering only refined them into something deadlier, then the XLTAR were approaching this all wrong. Conquering them was not an option. Subduing them was a fantasy. The only path left was understanding. A chime echoed. Karath entered, his expression grim. I have finished the latest analysis, he said, inserting another data module. The holographic display flared to life. This time, it wasn't battle footage or military records. It was something worse. Legends. Explain, Valor ordered. Karath gestured to the images. Every species we have conquered has legends, stories of their greatest warriors, their most feared battles. But humans? He turned, his gaze heavy. They tell stories of things that should not be real. The screen shifted, showing ancient texts, digital records, spoken testimonies across thousands of years. Heroes who fought against impossible odds, soldiers who defied death itself, nations that rose from complete annihilation. They don't just fight wars, Karath continued, his voice hushed. They fight against reality itself. The images changed again, displaying something that sent a cold dread through Valor's core. It was a pattern. From the earliest days of human civilization to their modern empires, a singular trait repeated itself throughout time. When humanity was pushed into a corner, they did not surrender. They became something else. Their myths, their stories, Karath whispered, almost to himself. They call it many things. Some call it perseverance. Some call it faith. Others, he looked at Valor. Others call it rage. A silence stretched between them. Valor clenched his jaw. You're telling me their stories are evidence of their strength. Karath did not flinch. I am telling you that these stories are not just stories. He stepped forward, voice urgent. When a human believes something strongly enough, they make it real. This is what sets them apart from every species we have ever encountered. The words hung in the air like a curse. If we attack them, Karath pressed on, they will believe they can defeat us. And the moment they believe it, his voice dropped to a whisper. It will become reality. Valor's breath came slow and measured. He had spent his life as a conqueror, a warrior. He had crushed species that had resisted, burned worlds that had defied him. He had faced defiance before, but never like this. Never an enemy that rewrote reality through sheer defiance. He exhaled sharply, his mind calculating every possible path forward. There had to be a way to win. There had to be an advantage the Exaltar could exploit. And then, a sudden alarm blared through the command chamber. Both Valor and Karath turned as a holographic projection of the battlefield emerged. A fleet, human vessels, was approaching. Not a massive armada, not a planet-crushing force. A small strike team. And yet, something about the way they moved, the confidence in their formation, sent a chill through Valor's spine. They're coming, Karath murmured. Valor's grip tightened. Then let's see if they truly are what we fear. Because if Karath was right, if humans could defy logic, turn impossible battles into victories, reshape reality through sheer will, then the Exaltar were already doomed. The battlefield was silent. Not in the way of peace, but in the way of something holding its breath before a storm. Valor stood on the bridge of his warship, eyes locked on the holographic display before him. The human fleet had arrived. It was smaller than he expected. Much smaller. A handful of vessels, strategically placed, positioned in a way that defied conventional tactics. This was not an overwhelming force. It was not a show of power. It was a message. They were not afraid. Karath analyzed the data with sharp precision, but even his usually steady hands trembled. They should not be doing this, he muttered. They are outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched. And yet, here they were. Valor could almost feel it, a shift in the air, an invisible pulse of something beyond logic. The humans had no reason to win, no possibility of victory. And yet, somehow, they would try. That was what made them terrifying. Commander, a Exaltar officer called. Incoming transmission from the human flagship. Valor's gaze flickered. This was unexpected. Humans were warriors, not diplomats. But curiosity pulled him forward. Open the channel. The display shimmered, and then, a human. A woman, clad in dark military attire, her posture as still as stone. Her eyes were sharp, cold, but alive in a way that made Valor's stomach twist. This is Admiral Rebecca Kane of the Terran Fleet, she said, her voice carrying the weight of something ancient and unyielding. I know you're watching us. I know you're wondering why we're here. She leaned forward slightly, just enough to make it feel like she was looking through the screen. You think we should be afraid. A pause, a heartbeat of silence. But you don't understand humans, do you? Karath shifted uneasily. Valor said nothing. Admiral Kane's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Let me help you. She gestured, and the transmission shifted. Suddenly, the holographic display was filled with history. Human history. Wars. Catastrophes. Battles fought not just against enemies, but against themselves. The fall of Earth's first empire, the desolation of Mars, the plague wars, the century of fire, the burning of Terra. Over and over, humanity had been broken. Over and over, they had survived. Admiral Kane's voice was softer now, but no less sharp. "Do you see it?" she asked. "Every war, every disaster, every attempt to wipe us from existence. You think you're the first." Her eyes gleamed. "You think you'll be the last." Valor clenched his jaw. His hands, steady in every battle, every war, now felt tight around nothing at all. Admiral Kane leaned in once more. "We are not the strongest. We are not the smartest. We are not the fastest." Her voice turned razor sharp. "But we do not break." The images on the screen shifted. Now, they showed something else. Not the past. The future. Human ships arriving in waves, more than the handful before them, more than a mere fleet. It was a storm. "You've seen our wars," Kane said. "You've seen what happens when we're cornered, when we're pushed, when we have no choice but to fight." Her expression darkened. "And you've just given us a reason." Silence. Cold, suffocating silence. Karath's fingers tightened against the console. "They knew," he whispered. "They knew we were watching. They wanted us to see this." Valor stared at the screen, at the storm that had yet to arrive. It was not just an army, not just a fleet. It was humanity itself. And suddenly, he understood. This was never about winning. It was about making sure the enemy lost more than they could ever afford. The Exiltar could win the battle. But the war had just begun.